Hi guys, welcome back for another video. If you're new here, my name is Bailey. I would love for you to subscribe so you can follow along for more videos like this. Today we're going to be talking about 8 ways that you can save money on your 2023 wedding. So I'm going to be going through 8 ways that me and my husband saved money on our wedding last year, which was in June of 2021. We probably saved like thousands of dollars collectively with all these things we did. So number 1 is to make your own wedding invitations. So I know that can sound daunting, especially if you've never used Canva, but Canva is going to be your best friend. So basically, if you've never heard of it, it's like an online free graphic design platform. So basically you can create any kind of graphics and anything. They have lots of pre-made stuff and it's really easy. It's super easy to work. So basically what I did and what I recommend doing is just look on Etsy, look on Pinterest, see if you can find any kind of invitations that you like, and then save those and then go in on Canva. I think you can just type invitation, create an invitation. Ours were 5x7 and you can make it whatever color you want. Basically just copy your inspiration and then you can order them through Canva and they are super inexpensive. So this is our invitation. We have some left over. This is our invitation and I mean it's super pretty, and the back of it, just you can have stuff on the back too. It came with these envelopes. I mean, it's just like a basic envelope. We ordered 100 of those, and so it came with 100 invitations and envelopes, and the total was $64. That's with tax. And so I know that usually invitations are upwards of like $300, $400, and what we ended up doing, I'll show you. We actually just like printed on top of these envelopes. I lived in my college house at the time, and so I was using my college roommate's printer, and we put them in her printer, and then we printed out, and it said like the people's address, Mr. and Mrs. whoever, then it had their address. So it looked really nice and really fancy, but it was super cheap. All we had to do was pay for the ink, and it looked really, really nice. People like kept asking if I had written it. It looked realistic, like calligraphy. Anyway, so that's one way you can save a ton, is just to make your own wedding invitations. Number 2 is to have your bridesmaids do their own hair and makeup. A lot of the times brides end up paying for bridesmaids hair and bridesmaids makeup, and so I mean you could just make them pay for their own if they wanted to get it done. And odds are like you can find something super easy to do with your hair if you're a bridesmaid on Pinterest. Like it could just be a half up half down like braid thing. It doesn't have to be super intense. Also the day is not about you, so it really doesn't even matter if your hair looks like super amazing or not. And then also if like you don't know how to do your own makeup, so me for example, I'm not a big makeup girl. I don't know like how to do contour and eyeshadow and all that kind of stuff. But I was in a couple of weddings this past summer, and there were bridesmaids in the wedding that did my makeup. So odds are there's someone else that can help you do whatever you don't know how to do yourself. Number 3 is to DIY your table decor. You can find something on Pinterest that you love that will be really easy to DIY. I don't actually want to say it will be super easy because a lot of DIYs take time and you have to put a lot of energy and effort into it, and sometimes it's trial and error, but I mean that's just the price that you pay for getting it way cheaper than you would if you hired someone to like do your decorations. But I'll tell you what I did. I loved this trend that I saw a few years ago. I'm sure you guys have seen it with like orange garland for Christmas time, and so my colors at my wedding were like super warm tone, like oranges and pinks and taupe and white and everything, and cream, and really warm colors. And I loved the idea of having orange garland, like dried oranges hanging on twine in the middle of our tables. And so I ordered cheesecloth from Amazon to drape in the middle of the tables because we had long rectangular tables. And then I remember it was a labor of love. I went to the store and bought so many oranges, also bought lemons. I didn't end up using a lot of the lemons though because mine turned like super brown and they just didn't look pretty, but I got so many lemons and so many grapefruit, and I was slicing those things. I was baking them every day. You bake them on 200 degrees for like 4 hours. You flip them every hour. I was baking them like every day leading up to the wedding. It was so much work, but it was so beautiful and I loved how it turned out, and so many people complimented it because it hadn't been done before, at least what they had seen, and so I loved that, and it was super inexpensive. I mean, total, like the cheesecloth I think was like around $250, but the orange garland was just the prices of all the oranges, and then I already had the twine. And then I thrifted a bunch of vases, so I saw the trend on TikTok where you would paint vases with like paint and you mix it with baking powder, and then it would create like a nice texture, and then you would paint the vases with that. So I thrifted all of our vases and then painted the vases, and they turned out so beautiful. I'll insert a picture here. I just loved the way that they looked all together, and it really came together with the orange garland. And if I had hired someone to do all of that, I can't even imagine how much it would cost. And then most of the time, like when you hire someone to do stuff like that, you're renting the decor from them, and so you don't even get it back to do anything with it. And I actually ended up selling all of my cheesecloth and then the vases back to my venue for like $200, so I got back a lot of the money that I spent on those. Number 4 is to get creative with your arbor. Arbors can be super expensive, especially if you're renting one. It could be hundreds of dollars, or if you're building one, that can also be super expensive depending on the wood prices and everything, because wood prices are so expensive today. I've seen the trend that's so beautiful with like the flowers kind of on the ground around where you'd be standing, and while that's super gorgeous, it's also so expensive. Like that probably cost upwards of like $1,000. And so if you're really trying to save money, what I would encourage you to do is just get creative on Pinterest and find something that is going to be cost effective. So I had seen this photo a long time ago on Pinterest, and it was like just cloth draping up in a tree, and then the couple was just standing underneath that, and I thought that was so beautiful. And so I looked at prices of cloth, like just to see what it would cost to buy it, and it was pretty expensive. And so then I found this company that was probably like 30 minutes away from where we were having our wedding, and they rented me a piece of this cloth, and it was like just to drape in the tree. They rented it to me for $25, and so it was super inexpensive, and that was our arbor. It was just hanging in a tree. It was so beautiful. Got so many compliments on that too. It turned out to be so beautiful for so inexpensive, so I would highly recommend doing something like that. Number 5 is to do away with wedding favors. If you've seen my other videos, you'll know that I'm a wedding photographer full-time, and so I go to tons of weddings every year, and I've seen lots and lots of different wedding favors. And just to be completely honest, probably about 75% of the weddings that I've been to in the past 2 years just have not had wedding favors. So I would say like people don't really expect it nowadays, just because it's becoming so normal to not have any wedding favors. Also, a lot of the times, even when people do have wedding favors, like when I'm walking out is usually when I'll grab one, because I love just to have them as like a keepsake to remember the couple's wedding. And I have like a little, actually in that bottom drawer right there, I have like all of my wedding favors that I've gotten, and I'll grab them on my way out, and so many times, more times than not, there's so many left over. And for wedding favors, you usually get like fewer than the amount of people you expect coming, because you know not everyone's going to stay all the way till the end, not everyone's going to grab one, etc. But there's usually so many left over. So even if people do want them, like most of the time they forget to grab one. And so wedding favors can save you a couple $100 not having them, because they're not necessary, and a lot of times people forget. But I understand if you have like something special, but it's a super easy way you can save a couple $100. Number 6 is to skip the cocktail hour and don't have hors d'oeuvres. This is kind of like a twofold situation, because you can't skip cocktail hour if you don't have a first look, but that's a whole other story. And I will just say briefly that I listened to this podcast called Office Ladies. It's the best. It's basically like Angela and Pam on The Office. Their names in real life are Angela and Jenna, and they are best friends, and they just kind of like break down every episode of The Office. And they always do these deep dives within their episodes where they kind of just go like deep on a certain topic and just find everything out they can about it on Google. And so they did that with the topic of why why is there a tradition of the bride or the groom not seeing the bride before the wedding day, and like veils and everything. And basically it dates back to when there were arranged marriages and the groom wouldn't be allowed to see the bride in case he doesn't think that she's attractive and wouldn't want to marry her. And so obviously that tradition is outdated, and like that's not the reason people do that anymore. People do it just because it's like the sweet moment where the groom sees the bride walking down the aisle. But just to know that's where the tradition came from, it changed my perspective completely. But I say all that to say that maybe that would convince you to do a first look, because you just get to spend more time on your wedding day together. And from a photographer's perspective, yeah, it's easier for me to do the photos before, and so that way after, like, we can just kind of not have that hour of photos. But just from like a friend's perspective, I think that it's so special to spend more time together on your wedding day, and that's ultimately the reason that we had a first look. But all that to say, if you do end up doing a first look, then I would recommend doing all of your photos before. You may have like a couple of family photo combinations you have to get after the ceremony just because like they're not there before the ceremony. But other than that, I would recommend doing all of your family, all of your wedding party, bride and groom before the ceremony, so that way afterward you can just go straight into the reception. You have more time in your reception, and then also you don't have to provide hors d'oeuvres. Hors d'oeuvres can run like $1,500 to $2,000, and if you don't have a cocktail hour, then you won't need hors d'oeuvres, and then you can save that money. However, I do want to add, just from a photographer's perspective, that if you do end up doing a first look and you do all your photos before, I would recommend taking like 10-15 minutes max out of your reception time to go do sunset portraits, because that's when you're going to get the best lighting for your bride and groom portraits, and it's just, trust me, you will treasure those photos. Number 7 is to skip the boutonnieres and corsages for parents and grandparents. Ultimately, this is just like a more traditional thing, and I think a lot of people are leaving this out nowadays. Some people don't know that they can do that, but this is me telling you, you're allowed to do what you want. It's your wedding. And also, they're going to be seated in that first row of reserved seats at your wedding ceremony, and so they're already going to be set apart. They don't need the extra little thing to set them apart. Usually those run about like $50 each, and so depending on how many grandparents and parents you have, that could save you a lot of money, especially if you have split families with like step parents, step grandparents, etc. It could run a lot of money. So that's another really easy way to skip out on the boutonnieres and corsages. Just stick with the bridesmaids bouquets and the boutonnieres for the groomsmen, and then you'll be good. And the last thing, number 8, is to choose a more cost-efficient dessert than cake. So I used to work at a bakery, and I'm familiar with like the pricing for that, and ours was a small town bakery, and so I think that our prices were a lot cheaper than what you usually see if you're just closer to like a bigger city. It obviously depends on like how many tiers you want in your cake and the decor and stuff, but just for like a basic wedding cake that doesn't have crazy decorations or anything, it would be about $500 to $700 for, we had like 130 guests, and so for about that amount, that's super expensive, and not a lot of people eat cake for the wedding days, and also that's just more of a traditional thing too. So what my husband and I decided to do is that we did a small cake just for us to cut, and obviously cutting the cake is a more traditional thing, but we just wanted to do it. And so we did a small like 6-inch cake for us to cut, and my former boss at the bakery ended up gifting us that cake as our wedding present, but I think it would have been about $30 had we had to pay for it. And if you were to get something like that at like Publix or something, I think it would probably be around the same amount. And then we had, our venue had a donut wall with like the little pegs and everything, and it said treat yourself. I loved that, and we both love Krispy Kreme donuts, so we decided to order donuts for our dessert for our wedding. I have the prices here. So we had 130 guests, and we didn't want to run out of donuts, but we assumed that most people would eat one, some people would eat two, and so we ordered 240 donuts, and I don't have exactly what we ordered here, but most of them were like original glaze. I think like 12 dozen or 10 dozen were original glaze, and then we had like a couple dozen strawberry, a couple dozen chocolate, and then a couple dozen chocolate with sprinkles. The total for 240 donuts was $191. And so just comparing the $191 for 240 donuts to $500, $600 for 130 guests, it is just a vast difference. And also I just think the donuts were cuter, they were more fun. I loved how the wall turned out. The day after our wedding, I looked on people's stories and saw that multiple people had taken like cute photos with the donut wall, and so I really loved that aspect, and it was just more fun and felt more us. So those are my 8 things that I recommend doing to save money for your wedding. If you guys are interested in more ways to save, let me know, because I love talking about this kind of stuff. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Would love for you to give it a thumbs up if you found it helpful, and go ahead and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you guys so much for being here, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye.